You believe vulnerability is power, but Machiavelli would call it a mistake. Have you ever walked into a room and felt the urge to prove you're kind, open, relatable? Maybe you shared something honest. Maybe you revealed a wound, a fear, a piece of your story. And in that moment, you believed it made you more human, more connected. But what if I told you every time you did that, you gave away something you couldn't take back? Machiavelli didn't romanticize human nature. He studied it, and he understood a truth most people still refuse to accept. Humans judge, not with compassion, but calculation. When you expose your softness in public, when you let the world see what makes you bleed, you're not earning empathy. You're offering ammunition. We live in an age that glorifies vulnerability. Be raw, be real, be open. But Machiavelli would ask, to whom? And at what cost? The crowd is not your friend. The audience is not your therapist. And no matter how kind they seem, are always assessing what you show them. Some out of curiosity, others out of strategy. Because weakness, once revealed, can't be unseen. And once someone knows where your armor cracks, they'll always know where to press next time. That's the uncomfortable truth. Power isn't about being fake. It's about knowing when to be silent, knowing that some truths, especially the painful ones, must be earned, not handed out like free samples. Machiavelli would say, protect your perception, control your image, let people underestimate your power, but never let them locate your fear. Because the moment you look too open, too willing to bleed for the room begins to test how far you'll bleed, and there are no second chances in that game. So I'll ask you now, have you been honest in the wrong places? Vulnerable in front of people who only smiled, but took notes? If so, it's time to unlearn. Because not everyone who listens deserves the truth. The one who craves applause becomes predictable, and anything predictable can be controlled. Machiavelli warned us not gently, not subtly, that the desire to be loved is one of the most dangerous positions a person can place themselves in, because love, when sought too openly, too desperately, becomes a leash, one that others can pull without ever needing to speak. Think about it. Every time you shape your words just to be accepted, every time you hide your truth to avoid being disliked, you are not just adjusting, you are training the world how to handle you. You are saying, in silence, please like me, please choose me. And they hear it. Oh, they hear it even when you smile. Validation feels innocent. A simple nod, a few likes, someone saying, I see you. But when that becomes your fuel, your compass, your measure of worth, you're no longer leading. You're reacting. You've handed over your emotional thermostat to people who don't even know how to hold their own. Machiavelli would call it a silent betrayal, not just of yourself, but of your own power. Because when you depend on others to define your value, you will do what it takes to keep their approval. Even if it means silencing your truth, even if it means betraying what you know is real. And worse, once they sense you need their validation, they'll test how far you'll go for it. That's when you start performing. Not out of joy, but out of fear. Fear of being invisible. Fear of not being enough. You laugh louder, agree quicker, shrink quieter, not because you believe it's right, but because you believe it's safer. But here's the trap. The more you seek approval, the less authentic you become. And the less authentic you become, the more you're rewarded with hollow praise. You're not loved for who you are. You're tolerated for who you've become to please others. The world doesn't admire those who beg to be seen. It watches them. It uses them. It forgets them. So ask yourself, what if your need to be understood is the very thing keeping you misunderstood? What if every attempt to be accepted has only taught people how to manipulate your hunger for belonging? Power doesn't chase applause. It doesn't seek permission. It speaks from a place that needs no echo. Machiavelli understood this. He knew that influence was not about being liked, it was about being respected. And respect doesn't come from being agreeable. It comes from being grounded. From being the person who can stand in silence without needing the crowd's reaction to feel real. You want to reclaim your power? Then stop begging for applause. Be willing to be disliked for the right reasons. Be willing to stand alone rather than bend into the mold someone else finds more palatable. Because the moment you stop chasing validation is the moment the world begins to wonder why it's not enough for you anymore. And in that space, you become something rare, someone no one can quite figure out, someone who doesn't need to be seen to be powerful, someone who is already whole. Have you ever shared something only to regret it later? Not because it wasn't true, not because it wasn't real, but because the moment it left your lips, the room shifted, the energy changed. You weren't seen as courageous, you were seen as cracked. There is a quiet trap that looks like connection. It wears the mask of intimacy, authenticity, emotional depth. It says, open up, let them in. But what it rarely tells you is this: people remember what hurts you far longer than they remember what inspires you. You think you're building trust by sharing your wounds, but often you're building a case, one that others will use not to understand you, but to define you. Machiavelli once said, men should either be caressed or eliminated. In other words, you are either seen as an asset or you are dispensable. And when you reveal too much pain, too quickly, too freely, you start looking less like a leader and more like someone waiting to be led. The world is not made of healers. It is made of observers, competitors, opportunists. And when you expose your scars, not everyone offers a bandage. Some take notes. Some smile, nod, and file that information away for later use. They don't hear, I've been through so much. They hear, this is how I break. And the next time conflict rises, the next time power shifts or stakes get real, they'll know where to press. Because you showed them. Not out of weakness, but out of the illusion that sharing pain equals connection. Let's be clear. Your story matters. Your wounds are valid. Your truth is sacred. But sacred things aren't handed to everyone. They're earned. And pain, when shared too quickly, too widely, becomes spectacly not story. The psychology is simple. Humans feel safest when they understand the social hierarchy. And emotional exposure? It repositions you, not at the top, but somewhere beneath the surface, labeled as sensitive, unstable, too much. Not always out loud, often in silence, in distance, in small shifts of tone and attention. You start to notice they don't confide in you the same way. They stop bringing you into certain conversations. They admire you less, not because you're not strong, but because you've let them see the pieces you're still trying to hold together. So you must ask yourself, who has earned the right to hear your pain? Who has the capacity to hold your truth without reshaping it into gossip, judgment, or pity? Because oversharing isn't bravery when it's misplaced. It's self-betrayal. True connection doesn't need an open wound to begin. It needs presence, integrity, discernment. You can still be honest, still be authentic, but with boundaries, with a sense of sacredness for what you've endured. Not to hide it, but to protect its power. Machiavelli didn't write for the emotionally naive. He wrote for those who understood that strategy is survival, and survival doesn't mean silence, it means knowing when to speak and who to speak to. So maybe the next time you're tempted to spill everything in the name of being real, pause. Ask yourself, do they deserve my story? Or are they just here for the show? Because not every ear that listens is a heart that cares, and not every listener leaves empty-handed. Some walk away knowing exactly where to strike. Machiavelli said, "Familiarity breeds contempt." He wasn't just talking about friendships or court politics. He was describing a law of human behavior. When something is always available, it stops being valuable. And yet, how often do we make ourselves endlessly available in the name of being kind, reliable, or present? Always texting back within seconds, always answering calls, always saying yes, even when we mean no. But here's the truth you weren't taught. Availability, when constant, becomes invisibility. What's always within reach loses its mystery. What's always ready to serve is rarely respected, and the one who never says no becomes the one no one really listens to. Let's look closer. When you make yourself too accessible, you're training people, not with words, but with your actions. You're teaching them that you are a resource, not a person, that your time is negotiable, that your energy is unlimited, and that their urgency matters more than your boundaries. That's not generosity. That's erosion. The psychology is simple. People pay attention to what is scarce. They pursue what is uncertain. They are intrigued by what feels earned. But when you're always there emotionally, mentally, physically, they stop seeing you as a choice. You become default, expected, taken for granted. Have you ever messaged someone and waited anxiously for their reply, only to feel a thrill when they finally respond? Now reverse that. If you're the one always replying instantly, what emotion do you think you're triggering? Certainty, predictability, no urgency, no respect. That's how the trap works. The fear of being forgotten drives you to stay overly available, but your availability is what makes you forgettable. You think you're proving loyalty, but what they see is someone without boundaries, someone easy to reach, easy to use, and eventually easy to replace. Let's go deeper. People respect those who make them wait, not out of arrogance, but because waiting builds value. A delay implies discernment, and discernment signals power. If someone always answers immediately, always drops everything for you, do you assume they have something more important to do? Number. You assume you are their highest priority. And if someone makes you their highest priority too quickly, you question why. Now ask yourself this: why do you do that for others? If you're constantly afraid that pulling back will make them leave, you're already not being chosen. You're being tolerated, trained to serve rather than be seen. Machiavelli would say, never give more than what is noticed. Never offer what hasn't been earned. Never make your presence so common that your absence holds no weight. And perhaps this is the hardest truth. Your silence can say more than your words. Your delay can reveal more than your yes. Your boundary can teach more than your availability ever will. You don't need to be cold, just intentional. You don't need to ignore people. Just stop erasing yourself to please them. The next time you feel the urge to respond instantly, ask yourself, am I responding from confidence or from fear? Because power doesn't chase, power doesn't explain, and power certainly doesn't live at the mercy of other people's schedules. When you stop being so available, something shifts. People notice, not just your absence, but your presence. They see you differently. They speak more carefully. They act more intentionally. And in that space, you stop being a tool they use and start being a force they respect. Envy never announces itself with honesty. It wears disguises sarcasm, criticism, false concern, but its message is always the same. You have something I don't, and I resent you for it. Machiavelli warned, a man who envies others admits his weakness, because envy is not just a feeling, It's a signal, a broadcast of internal defeat, a public admission that you've measured yourself and fallen short. You may think your envy is silent, subtle, but it leaks. In the side comment, in the passive-aggressive joke, in the way your smile fades too quickly when someone else succeeds. It reveals more than you realize. It tells people exactly where your insecurities live, where your sense of inadequacy breathes. Let me tell you a story. He was the first in his circle to break out, built a business from nothing, worked through weekends while others partied, took risks, faced ridicule, and kept going when no one believed. Then came the success, the home, the car, the subtle confidence that only those who've walked through fire can wear. And that's when it started. Not open criticism, just whispers, jokes, comments that sounded friendly but carried weight. He's changed. Money made him cold. He forgot where he came from. No one said it directly. But the tone had shifted. The room he once belonged to had become hostile in silence. Not because he failed, but because he didn't. Envy rarely attacks the unworthy. It targets the one who reflects back what others could have been, but weren't willing to become. And that's what makes envy dangerous. Not just for the one who receives it, but for the one who harbors it. Because every time you feel envy and feed it, you shrink. You declare yourself the lesser one. You step into the shadow of another, instead of building your own light. Envy corrodes from the inside. It poisons your ability to celebrate, to admire, to learn. It replaces curiosity with judgment, gratitude with bitterness. And most dangerously, it builds walls between you and growth. Because when you envy someone, you stop studying them. You stop asking how. You stop learning. All you do is burn. But here's the twist. The moment you show envy, you give away power. You confirm your ranking not in status, but in mindset. People stop seeing you as a peer. They see you as insecure, reactionary, predictable. Machiavelli understood this. He knew that envy doesn't just reveal where you are, it invites others to keep you there. Because those who envy rarely rise. They stay too busy resenting the view from below. So ask yourself when someone else shines, do you dim the light or do you step closer? When success enters the room, do you criticize or do you take notes? Because your reaction doesn't reflect them. It exposes you. You cannot rise while envying those above you. You cannot inspire while resenting those who do. You cannot lead if you're still comparing in silence. Kill the envy, not because it's immoral, but because it's inefficient. Let others be a mirror, not a threat. Let their strength remind you what's possible, not what's missing. And remember, this envy is not about what they have. It's about what you think you lack. Shift that, and you shift everything. Righteous anger feels noble. It feels sharp, focused, even heroic. You are outraged for the right reasons. You see injustice, hypocrisy, manipulation, and your blood boils. But Machiavelli would ask you this: who benefits when you explode? He wrote, hatred is earned by good deeds as much as bad ones. Meaning, your virtue does not protect you from attack. Sometimes, it invites it, because the moment your anger becomes visible, it becomes a tool that others can use against you. Let's be clear. Anger is not weakness, but visibility is. And when your anger shows, when it burns too openly, too righteously, it tells the room exactly how to reach you, exactly how to manipulate you. If they can provoke you, they can predict you. And if they can predict you, they can control the game. You think you're standing up for truth, but the more reactive you are, the more easily you become a puppet for those who know how to pull emotional strings. Righteousness does not protect you from exploitation. In fact, it often blinds you to it. Because when you're convinced you're right, you're less likely to see when you're being played. That is the paradox. The more justified your anger feels, the more dangerous it becomes. Not for your enemies, but for your clarity. Because emotion clouds strategy. And no matter how noble your cause, if you're too easily set on fire, you will burn alone. Let's go deeper. Public outrage is predictable. It's expected. And in many cases, it's designed. Outrage sells, it trends, it rallies. But it rarely wins. Why? Because those who feed on outrage know something most don't righteous. Anger is not hard to trigger. It only needs a headline, a slight, a stage. And once you're triggered, you're not in control. You're in motion. Fighting, posting, arguing, losing energy, losing time, losing perspective. Machiavelli wasn't a moralist, he was a realist. He knew that emotion, especially public emotion, is a weapon usually wielded by those who stay quiet while others scream. And here's the truth few admit. The world doesn't change because you're angry. It changes because you're strategic. Your cause might be real, your values may be solid, but your reaction, if too loud, too raw, becomes theater. And in theater, the loudest character is rarely the one writing the script. So here's the warning. Guard your fury. Not because it's wrong, but because it's powerful. And power, when left exposed, becomes ammunition. Keep your edge, but temper your flame. Learn to hold the fire without letting it erupt on command. Learn to respond, not react. Learn to play the long game, even when everything in you wants to strike now. Because those who master their anger become unpredictable, and those who are unpredictable become untouchable. Let them wonder what you feel. Let them guess what provokes you. The less they know, the more they respect. In a world full of performers, be the one who holds silence like a sword. You are not here to be emotionally impressive. You are here to be mentally unshakable. And sometimes, the greatest strength is not in what you express, but in what you choose not to show. Fear is human. It lives in all of us. But once spoken aloud, once exposed in front of others, it becomes something else. It becomes identity. Not because fear is shameful, but because people rarely forget where you flinched. Machiavelli understood this better than most. He said, "Better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both." Not because fear is noble, but because it is respected. Because love, when not paired with power, invites manipulation, and true fear keeps people from trying. When you admit fear in private, it can be healing. When you admit fear in public, it becomes irreversible exposure. Not everyone should know what haunts you. Not because you're hiding, but because you're protecting something they will never handle fairly. In any group, social, professional, even intimate moment you reveal what terrifies you, the room changes. They nod, they comfort, but something inside them clicks. They catalog that moment. A fears rejection. She fears abandonment. He's afraid of not being enough, and they might not weaponize it today, but the knowledge is there, waiting, and people, even unconsciously, begin to relate to you through the lens of that fear. It defines you, not because it should, but because fear is sticky. Once known, it clings. You are no longer the calm one, the strong one, the composed one. You are now the one who fears, and that shifts everything. The tragedy is this: fear deserves compassion, but the world rarely offers it. Because fear, once named, disrupts the hierarchy. It destabilizes perception, and most people do not know how to hold that. So instead, they distance, they label, they remember. You think it will be a moment of connection, but often it becomes a mark. That's why your fear should not be displayed, not because it's wrong, but because it's not safe. Not every emotion deserves an audience. Not every truth belongs in the open. This doesn't mean you become numb. It means you become strategic. It means you build inner rooms where fear is heard, understood, and managed without turning it into a performance. Because the moment someone sees what scares you, they see the way in. And that door is not easily closed again. Machiavelli would warn you, vulnerability, especially through fear, is a luxury reserved for private spaces, trusted hands, not for the room, not for the crowd, because the crowd forgets your wins, but always remembers your weak spots. So ask yourself, who knows your deepest fear? And more importantly, who benefits from knowing it? Because fear, when revealed, changes your shape in the eyes of others. It alters the way they speak to you, the way they test you, the way they think they can move you. Once they see what scares you, they will never forget it. So, hold your fear gently, with reverence, in silence. Let it teach you, not betray you. Let it sharpen your awareness, not soften your presence. Because you can walk through life afraid, or you can walk through it unreadable. And when they cannot see what shakes you, they cannot shake you. That is power. You are not weak. You are simply untrained. You were taught to be honest, open, available, to share, to please, to seek approval. And maybe you followed that script for years, believing it was the right path to connection, to respect, to power. But the truth is quieter than that. The truth is this: most people are not weak by nature. They are exposed by habit. You were never taught the value of mystery, the weight of silence, the discipline of restraint. No one showed you how to hold your fear without showing it, how to protect your truth without apologizing for it. That's not your fault, but it is now your responsibility. The Machiavellian mindset is not about manipulation. It's not about deceit or coldness. It's about clarity. Seeing the game for what it is. Seeing yourself for what you can become. It teaches you to survive in a world that reads signals more than words. To master your presence without needing constant expression. To guard your power, not just with strength, but with awareness. Your silence is not absence, it is a strategy. Your calm is not weakness, it is control. And when you learn to move from that place not emotionally exposed, but internally rooted, you become someone no one can easily read, control, or break. So take this with you. You don't need to perform. You don't need to be liked. You need to be unreadable enough to be respected, and solid enough to be remembered. Which of these weaknesses hit you the hardest? Share in the comments. Let's unlearn together. And if this message challenged you, even just a little, you already know what to do. Subscribe for more brutal truths that set you free.